I want to report to you on one of the biggest fiascos in the history of our foreign policy, the fiasco of Formosa. For about 10 years, we poured money, men, equipment, advice, friendship into the Chinese nationalist government on Formosa. And for about 10 years, we heard and believed Chiang Kai-shek's pledge that his troops would go back to the Chinese mainland to retake it from communism. And for about 10 years, we considered the Chinese nationalists our good friends and allies. We fought for them at the United Nations, argued with the French and British who didn't agree with us, and we even passed a resolution through Congress at Eisenhower's request, pledging that the United States of America would go to war to defend Formosa and its offshore islands. Then suddenly, almost overnight, we found that the Chinese nationalists were so intensely anti-American that they mobbed Americans in the streets and made the American embassy a shambles. In a minute, I'll give you the inside story of just how the American people were so badly fooled. First of all, let's see exactly what happened in Formosa. I don't need to tell you that American embassy property in any country is sacrosanct, protected by international law. Not even a foreign policeman can enter without permission from the United States. Despite this, a mob of Chinese nationalists broke into our embassy at Taipei. And no embassy or consulate in the memory of diplomats has been so fiercely, so completely gutted. The crowds began storming the embassy compound in the morning. Hours passed. There was ample time to mobilize the police or the Chinese troops, which American taxpayers have paid to train and equip. But neither was called. Instead, the crowds were allowed to break inside the embassy, destroy its furnishings, smash its windows, crack up its desks, pull down the U.S. Information Library, and destroy its films. Most significant of all, a gang equipped with crowbars and heavy tools went direct to the room holding the secret code of the United States. There they proceeded to batter down the wall and steal the code. As a result, the Chinese are now able to decode every secret message sent by Eisenhower and Secretary Dulles to every capital and nation. We've now changed the code, of course, but they are still able to read past messages. Obviously, it had been deliberately planned in advance to break into the embassy and steal the code. And Chiang Kai-shek's police and troops did nothing to stop it. All this happened despite the fact that Chiang Kai-shek was supposed to be vigorously pro-American. So the big question is, how did the United States make the mistake of depending so heavily on a government which couldn't be depended upon? How were the American people so fooled? The answer, I think, should be given in detail, but in brief, the American people were fooled by one of the most potent lobbies ever to operate in this country. It was a lobby which contributed campaign money to certain senators, gave free trips to Asia to certain newspaper men, all for the purpose of keeping one very wealthy family, the Sung family, in power, even when there wasn't the remotest chance of their ever getting back to the mainland of China. It is they we have supported with billions of American dollars. In the course of this, some of them have become extremely wealthy. T.V. Sung, Chiang Kai-shek's brother-in-law, once chartered a special airplane to fly to Connecticut to bring dogwood back to his sick wife in China. The trip cost about $30,000, paid indirectly by the American taxpayer. Dr. H.H. Kung, another brother-in-law, was caught by the U.S. Army, carrying $1 million in cash in his suitcase over the hump from Burma. He said he had $9 million left in New York. U.S. officials confiscated the $9 million. Part of the money sent by us to nationalist China has come back to the United States to pay lobbyists and public relations men in order to keep this flow of foreign money continuing. I have here an excerpt from a Central Intelligence report marked SO 33159, which states that Chiang Kai-shek withdrew $40 million from the Bank of China for propaganda work and bribery in the United States. I'm quoting. $35 million of the total was paid January 1949 by the Bank of China upon the direction of O.K. Wee to Madam Chiang Kai-shek. Other payments were Sun Fo, $2,400,000, Chen Li Fu, $1.5 million, Bishop Paul Yu Pin, $1 million, Hu Shi, $1 million. Bank officials refused to pay, but finally did so when directed by O.K. Wee, who said the money was to be used for propaganda in the United States, which would require bribery of American officials, unquote. Now let's see how some of this money was spent. Part of it was spent with Allied public relations headed by David Charnay, who does a very excellent job of influencing public opinion. But in 1950, Mr. Charnay went further and sent one of his men, Leo Casey, out to California to support Congressman Richard Nixon, now Vice President, in his race for the Senate. Major Louis Kung, nephew of Chiang Kai-shek, sometimes seen around Washington cashing $1,000 bills, also went to Los Angeles and supported Mr. Nixon financially and otherwise. Nixon, of course, was elected, and as a senator, he was a staunch supporter of Chiang Kai-shek and the Sung dynasty. Now here's another secret report on Chinese propaganda written by Norman Page, real name James Black Dupuy, a paid agent for the Chinese nationalists. He wrote the following report on how he was influencing the press and the radio in the USA. He said the Liberty Network is carrying a steady plea for training and equipping 500,000 Chinese troops on Formosa. Frank Gannett, he said, of the New York publishers, is a welcome addition to the pipeline. Richard Pollard, the San Francisco Examiner feature writer and old Asia hand, Richard Chase, feature writer of the San Francisco News, are all in full accord with us, and so on. Now, I'm sure that many, perhaps all of these writers, did not know they were being influenced, but that is a sample of how the China lobby worked night and day to fool the American people into thinking that Sung and the Chiang Kai-shek dynasty was fervently pro-American and had the fervent backing of millions of Chinese. In a minute, I'll call the roll of some of these influencers of American public opinion. As I said, all sorts of people got aboard the China lobby bandwagon, some because of honest conviction, some because they were paid by the Chinese to keep more money going to Formosa. One potent influencer of public opinion was Harry Luce, editor of Time, Life, and Fortune, a volunteer. Then there was Roy Howard, head of the powerful Scripps Howard newspapers, chief owner of the far-flung United Press, and a volunteer. A paid agent was William J. Goodwin, a Christian fronter, a follower of Father Cogden, paid $30,000 a year to wine and dine congressmen for Chiang Kai-shek. Also hopping aboard the China bandwagon were such right-wing characters, probably volunteers, as Gerald L.K. Smith, professional anti-Semite, his friend Joe Camp, convicted of contempt of Congress, Merwin K. Hart, another rabble-rouser, and a former agent of the Kaiser during World War I, Dr. Edward Rumley, who was jailed as a German agent. Then there were D. Worth Clark, ex-senator from Idaho, who went to China on a special survey for pro-Chiang Kai-shek senators. William Bullitt, the former ambassador to Moscow, an untiring volunteer for the China lobby. General Al Wiedemeyer, who once turned down $5 million to work for Chiang, but has done a great deal for him as a volunteer. And Louis Johnson, former Secretary of Defense, the personal attorney for Dr. H.H. Kuhn. And Admiral Charles Cook, one-time commander of the 6th Fleet, which protected Formosa, and went to work later for Commerce International China, a Formosa subsidiary which handles purchases for Chiang Kai-shek. Also, quite a few potent senators and congressmen got aboard the China lobby bandwagon, some out of conviction, some because their campaign expenses were paid by the Chiang Sung dynasty. The roll call includes Senator William Nolan of California, sometimes called the senator from Formosa. Senator Stiles Bridges of New Hampshire, a very potent Republican. Senator Jenner of Indiana, the late Senators McCarran and McCarthy. And finally, Congressman Walter Judd of Minnesota, a former missionary in China. However, not all Chinese lobby money has been accepted. Steve Mitchell, the honest, amateurish former chairman of the Democratic National Committee, once turned down $50,000 offered by the lobby to influence Democrats. The China lobby had much better luck on the whole winning Republicans than Democrats. But here's a secret cable sent to Chiang Kai-shek by his top agent in Washington, Chen Che-mai, June 17, 1950, about the problem of influencing Democrats. After careful screening and rejecting many, this says, we have found an attorney by the name of Halley. It refers to Rudolph Halley, who was once a counsel for the Truman Committee and also a member of the New York City Council. He's a law partner in the firm of William Boyle, this cable says, chairman of the Democratic National Committee. The relationship between Boyle and Halley is extremely close. Therefore, the latter is capable of reaching the highest levels of the proper authorities. Mr. Halley is willing to be hired by us under the capacity of legal advisor with annual salary of $30,000. After careful scrutiny, we reached the decision that such a rare opportunity should not be missed. At least we should use him for establishing friendships and relationships with the Democratic Party. We should also receive secret information from him. With this information, we could build a direct route for our ultimate aim," unquote. I talked to Mr. Halley about this. He admitted that he'd had talks with the Chinese, but in the end he did not take this job. Well, this secret cable to Chiang Kai-shek illustrates how influence has been bought, and in this case they tried to buy it to influence Washington. I'll have a final word in just a minute. Nobody really knows how much money we have poured into Formosa, but we do know that much of this money was built on a very flimsy foundation, the myth that Chiang Kai-shek and his people at heart were dependable friends of the United States. The devastating riots in Formosa have now proved how flimsy that foundation was. And the lesson to be learned is that if a lobby is powerful enough and spends money enough and hires people high up enough, it can fool almost all the American people most of the time.